So good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome back to the next in our series of online talks. We're going to dive into carving turns, and I know many of you will have been stood at the top of a picture perfect piece first thing in the morning, look down at this wonderful field of corduroy just dropping off into the horizon, and just thought to yourself, let's rip. And yeah, this is what this talk is all going to be about. So, Warren, why don't you kick us off then?
Yeah, absolutely. So I know from my point of view, week in, week out in Verbier, we usually define a lot of our group levels actually, and I'm sure same with Ski Club because we're very familiar with Ski Club and how well the level system works. It is a huge chunk of the skiing general public, and I sort of can include ski instructors in that as well that are really good, sort of 70% of the way at carving, but are not completely carving from start to finish of the turn, even though sometimes they may wish to. The Ski Club of Great Britain ski days with myself and Shemi are great, right? So you get a couple of hours, you really do get to have your video looked at, your skiing pointers worked on. It was everyone's first request actually at Chill Factory last Tuesday to work on carving. A lot of people were using the sort of the term fore and aft. They want to get onto the front of the ski a bit earlier in the turn because obviously it bends the ski. And one of those subjects there, I mean, it's on the front cover here if you can see it. There's Jordan from our team sort of laying out a really nice carved turn. And when you look even closer up on the screen, you can really see the ski bend there. And what we were finding up at Chill Factory was we were very lucky. It was quite a quiet day, actually. And that's what we love about skiing there in the summer. We were letting speed build up a bit and really laying out 3 or 4 turns using out the whole slope. What many people found was that there are a few factors when you look back at the video as to why carved turns were working better in one direction, like in your intuitive side or your natural side. And then in the body form that how people were either making angles or not, it was affecting how they carved. One of the really big topics that sprung out of the day was that it was the last third or last quarter of the turn that they weren't managing to hold on to the carve, and it was either skidding out or the ski went straight or whatever it was. But we were looking at creating angles in the body. We were looking at pressing on the ski a bit earlier in the turn. Once people got a bit comfortable and confident, we did start to try and think about moving forwards and backwards, like fore and aft, it's called, I guess, in ski terms. And interestingly, one of the areas that was almost underworked or not wanting to go there was actually the aft movement, the getting on the back of the ski at the end of the turn. And there was this big conversation that arose. Was, yeah, well, I'm always told not to lean back on my skis, stay in the middle or stay over the skis, which is obviously, especially from a beginner up to intermediate level, makes total sense. But interestingly, the block, because a lot of these skiers were actually really competent skiers. And what they were doing is they were making great movements into their turn, a lot of confidence, especially on one side of the body. They were making great angles, like upper and lower body separation. But they just weren't having the confidence to actually get on the tail of the ski. A bit like you imagine the brilliance of Dave Riding when he's, going for it in the slalom course. And you can really see that sort of almost like a pure squat position, trying to get the use out of the tail of the ski, the acceleration. So people didn't actually think they should be there in that place on the ski. They felt over the years of being taught and working through the progressions, I stay away from the tail of the ski. I stay away from going back seat on my skis. And when they trusted it, they got a lovely finish to the turn by actually taking a risk and going a bit back seat, as long as they knew the way to get back into the front seat for the next turn.
Awesome. And I guess that plays a little bit into a lot more of the technology that we're seeing in skis these days with having a little bit more power and stability in the rear of the ski to give you that stability to finish off your carving turns. But what can we do right here, right now to begin to think about shifting that weight backwards, but still with the ability to get it forwards? What can we do at home to help us along that
What
way a little bit?
in terms of at home, one of the areas that cropped up, you may have seen them on the social media that were posted, but we had to mimic some angulation movements. So what we did, and this is interesting for at home, we actually sort of mimicked it. And even doing it with skis off physically, it didn't feel the same. So it was something as simple as sort of show you up against the wall here. We were sort of making our angles here in the body. And what everyone found was, I think most people's favorite term, I think it was to the right. So standing in this position, there was no restriction. They did two things. They increased the angle because of working on mimicking the angle off of snow. So we made this sort of really obvious question, like, do you do this often in your day-to-day life? Or is it just when you clip your skis on, come to the Chill Factory or Hemel, wherever people are skiing, and do you expect to do it? And actually, it was a really common sense conversation. Like, well, no, why would you? If you watch great skiers, if we watch our British team athletes, and we see these incredible angles and movements, and everything we look up to and aspire to, we have to presume that if you're not doing it, like when you're going to the shops, or if you're not creating crazy angles when you're playing football, or if you're on your bike going around London, why would it just work when you ski? I mean, it's what gets people to get in angles like this. This is Victor from our team. He's a great instructor at level 4, making some beautiful angles like that. And you can see the same where the ski is really, really bent. I'm not sure how clear that comes out. But I mean, look at the leg lean angle. I mean, I probably can't do that at my age anymore. The reality of it is really simple tests here that we were showing people. Get going and doing them.
We don't really carve in powder. We're not supposed to carve in powder, but obviously that I'm assuming what you're implying is that you do to a greater or lesser extent. So can you develop that a little bit more
Yeah,
about
absolutely. So
how we are supposed to carve in powder, and then when it comes to controlling that edge, what we're supposed to do with it?
yeah, absolutely. So it's a really interesting one. In fact, that got brought up the other day because one of the people in the group said, oh, I've always been told to lean back a bit in powder
Mm.
because I'm going to sink or go over my handlebars or the front of the skis. If you think about, a beautiful powder field and, you're chomping at the bit to get down it, it looks amazing. You look back up at your tracks, it's like, oh my God, wow, that's my perfect day. You had to have carved down it to be able to make those tracks. The old school way you could look at it also, you can kind of bounce your way through it, right? So you can make the short radius turns and bounce your way through it. But even when you watch an expert skier, they're still making an element of carve, even in those little bounce turns. To be stood straight up on top of the ski is also doable. You can sort of bounce your way through it and put pressure against it. When you press against it, kind of almost makes a bit of a powder wall. But to make sort of medium to longer radius turns in powder, you really do have to carve, because once you're submerged, and let's compare it to I'm not carving, I'm skidding. Skidding would be almost an impossibility because you'd be trying to sideways push about 20 ton of powder out of your way. It'll trip you up. So even without realizing it, someone could almost be more encouraged to have to carve because they wouldn't get away with it.
Yeah, I think you've just described my sort of off-piste journey over the past 2 seasons there, going from that kind of bouncing turn to turn into much more of a carving progression. So yeah, that sounds very, very familiar with me.